Am I the a-hole for not giving up my first-class seat to a mom with a baby on a flight? She was screaming in my face by then, baby wailing on her hip, as I clutched the armrests of my first-class seat. I could feel all eyes on us in the cabin. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact and not budge. It had started innocently enough barely 30 minutes earlier when I first settled into seat 1A, a window seat I'd paid extra for on this long flight. I was exhausted from a week-long work trip, and I'd upgraded myself to first class as a treat for surviving endless meetings. I couldn't wait to just lean back, put on my headphones, and maybe catch a nap. Boarding was nearly complete when I first saw her, a frazzled-looking woman in her early 30s, juggling a squirming infant and an overstuffed diaper bag. She looked tired and desperate. As she slowly made her way down the aisle from economy, I noticed her scanning seat numbers frantically while bouncing her baby. I figured she was searching for her seat, silently sympathized with her tough situation. Flying with a baby must be stressful, and then went back to queuing up a relaxing playlist on my phone. That's when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. I looked up to see the same woman standing in the aisle next to my seat, nervously biting her lip. The baby on her hip had wide, teary eyes, but was quiet for the moment, sucking on a pacifier. "Hi, excuse me," she said softly, trying to smile. I'm really sorry to bother you, but is there any chance you'd be willing to swap seats with me? I'm in 23B. 23B. That was in row 23, definitely back in economy, likely a middle seat given the B. My comfortable first-class cocoon versus a cramped seat between other passengers? The answer was obvious, but I tried to be polite. "Oh," I replied, a bit taken aback. "I'm sorry, but I'd prefer to keep my seat. I paid for first class specifically to be comfortable on this flight." Her face fell instantly. "I understand," she said, shifting the baby's weight on her hip. "It's just, I'm a single mom, and this is my first time flying with him. I thought we'd be okay in economy, but he's been really fussy. I was hoping the extra space up here would help calm him down. He's only 8 months old, and he's having a hard time." I felt for her, I really did. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, hear the plea in her voice. A tiny pang of guilt tugged at me. In a perfect world, I'd love to help, but I'd spent a fortune on this upgrade, money I budgeted carefully. And beyond the money, I had my own needs. I'm a big guy, 6 feet 2 inches, with chronic back pain from an old sports injury. Flying coach for 6 hours will leave me aching for days. That's why I splurged on first class in the first place, to take care of myself. "I'm really sorry," I repeated more firmly. "I have back issues, and I booked this seat for the extra comfort. I hope you can understand." The mom's expression hardened slightly at my continued refusal. The polite facade started to slip. "Are you sure?" she pressed. "We just switched for the rest of the flight. You could have my seat, it's not so bad. We just really need some space." I shook my head, trying to remain empathetic but firm. "I am sure. I hope you can find some way to make do, but I can't give up my seat." Her eyes narrowed just a touch, and she gave a tight nod. "All right. Sorry for asking," she muttered, sounding more annoyed than sorry now. Without another word, she turned and made her way back down the aisle, bouncing the baby a little more aggressively as she walked off. I exhaled, feeling a mixture of relief at the confrontation being over and guilt for having to say no to a struggling mom. The middle-aged businessman in the seat across the aisle leaned over and whispered, "Good on you. Don't give it up." I gave a polite half-smile and nodded. Still, as I watched her head toward the coach section, I second-guessed myself for a moment. Was I being an asshole? She was dealing with so much. No, I had to stick to my boundary. I paid for this seat fair and square. The plane took off, and I tried to relax. About an hour into the flight, I just started watching a movie on the in-flight entertainment, finally starting to unwind. That's when the baby started screaming. It started as a whimper, then a whine, and soon graduated into a full-throated wail. The cries pierced through the curtain separating first class and economy. A few of us in the first-class cabin exchanged glances. We all knew exactly which baby it was. My noise-canceling headphones dampened the sound a bit, but not completely. I tried to focus on my movie. Babies cry. It's not unusual, I told myself, but the crying went on and on without stopping. It had been at least 10 minutes, and the baby was still howling. The flight attendants were still in the galley at this point, maybe heating a bottle for the baby or trying to help. I wasn't sure. Passengers in first class were shifting uncomfortably. Then, to my dismay, I saw the curtain between cabins rustle. Out stepped the mom, bouncing her inconsolable baby and heading right for our section. I sank down in my seat, hoping maybe she was just going to the lavatory at the front and not coming to. Nope. She stopped directly at my seat again. I braced myself. She looked upset. Red blotchy cheeks, possibly from embarrassment or frustration, maybe both. The baby was bawling, tiny fists clenched, face tomato red. Please, she said over the noise, raising her voice to be heard over her baby's cries. There was a desperation in her tone now. He won't calm down. I'm begging you. Just for a little while. Can we switch? Maybe the quiet up here will help him sleep. I felt a flush creeping up my neck. The other first-class passengers were definitely watching us now. I caught the older woman in 1C peering over her glasses, and a guy a row behind leaning forward to see what I would do. I even noticed one of the flight attendants standing near the galley, eyeing the situation like she wasn't sure if she should intervene. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I said yet again, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. Like I said before, I can't give up my seat. I'm sorry your baby is upset, truly, but moving up here isn't going to magically stop him from crying, and I really need this seat. Her eyes flashed with a mix of anger and disbelief. How can you say that without even trying? You won't even try to help us, she practically yelled. At this point, the gentleman across the aisle, the same one who had whispered support to me earlier, decided to pipe up loudly. Ma'am, he paid for this seat. Please respect that and return to your section. She rounded on him, furious. You stay out of this, she spat, her voice trembling. The baby hiccuped between screams. She looked back at me, now openly glaring. You're really not going to help? At all? What kind of person are you? I felt my face burn with shame and discomfort. I hated confrontation, and we had the entire cabin's attention. I kept my tone as measured as possible. I'm a person who paid a lot of money for this seat and has a bad back. I need to stay here for my own well-being. I'm sorry you're struggling, but your planning issues are not my fault. Perhaps I could have been gentler with that last line, but I was at wit's end. Her face went from angry to absolutely livid. Wow, she said loudly with a bitter laugh. Look at this guy, everyone. Must be nice to be so privileged that you can't even let a mother with a baby sit in your fancy seat for a couple hours. I saw a few other first-class passengers shaking their heads. At her or me, I wasn't sure. I felt sick to my stomach, wanting nothing more than to sink into the floor and disappear. The flight attendant finally approached, placing a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. Ma'am, the attendant said firmly, you need to return to your seat. I can bring you something to help, maybe a warm bottle or some earplugs for the people around you, but you can't stay up here disturbing the other passengers. The mom looked like she might burst into tears herself now. He won't stop crying. I don't know what else to do, she pleaded with the attendant. The attendant gave a tight smile. I understand it's hard, but I need you to please lower your voice and return to your seat. You're causing a disruption. I'm causing a disruption? The woman repeated incredulously. She gestured at me. What about him? He could solve this in a second by giving up his damn seat. The flight attendant looked at me, and I could see in her eyes that she was thinking the same thing as everyone else. What's the harm in moving, really? But of course she couldn't say that. Instead, she maintained her professional composure. Sir is a paying first-class passenger, and it's his right to remain here. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't force another passenger to move. The mom stared at me with pure hatred. For a second, I thought she might actually throw something at me, or, God forbid, the baby. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed back through the curtain, still muttering angrily. The flight attendant sighed and followed her, disappearing back into economy. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My hands were shaking. The businessman across from me gave me a sympathetic shrug and went back to his laptop. Conversation slowly resumed. The crisis seemed to be over. Or so I thought. About 40 minutes later, I got up to use the lavatory at the front of the plane. I was trying to time it for when that mother was nowhere in sight, because I really didn't want another run-in. The baby had finally cried itself to sleep, I think, because I hadn't heard a peep for a while. As I stepped out of my row, I glanced down the aisle into economy big mistake. She was sitting in an aisle seat, maybe 5 rows back from the curtain, and she saw me immediately. I felt my stomach twist as she practically leapt out of her seat when she saw me heading for the restroom. I hurried into the tiny bathroom and locked the door, my heart thudding. Maybe she just went to stretch her legs, I told myself. Maybe she wasn't waiting for me. No such luck. When I opened the door and stepped out, there she was in the galley area, baby in her arms but blessedly quiet now, maybe asleep. She was blocking my path back to my seat. Before I could even utter a word, she hissed. You're a real piece of work, you know that? Do you have any idea what this flight has been like for me? I glanced around. Another flight attendant was nearby, pointedly pretending not to hear us, as she organized some cups. I was keenly aware that I was standing in the aisle with this furious woman and her sleeping baby, in full view of at least a couple of first-class passengers craning their necks. Ma'am, please let me by, I said softly, trying not to agitate her or wake the baby, who had finally dozed off, head on her shoulder. I need to get back to my seat. She didn't budge. Instead, she leaned in, her face inches from mine. Her voice was low, shaking with anger. I hope you're happy. My baby cried himself sick back there. He puked all over me. All because you couldn't be bothered to help. I hope your fancy seat was worth it." My eyes dropped to her shirt. Sure enough, there was a large, damp stain on her shoulder and down her front. A pang of guilt and pity hit me. Did the baby really vomit? The smell drifting my way suggested yes. God, that must have been awful to deal with in a cramped row. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," I said, and I meant it. "But it's still not my fault. I'm allowed to sit in the seat I paid for." She let out a harsh, quiet laugh, bouncing the baby slightly as he slept on. "People like you. You think just because you have money, you're entitled to everything? You couldn't stand to give up a little comfort to help someone? It wouldn't have cost you a cent to switch with me. But no, your comfort is more important than anything or anyone else, isn't it?" My face felt hot again. "It's a 6-hour flight," I whispered, trying to keep my own voice from shaking. 6 hours of severe discomfort could really mess up my back. I do feel bad for you, I do, but I can't wreck my health. And I did pay more for that seat for a reason." She rolled her eyes at that. "Must be nice to have that luxury. Some of us don't have that kind of money. I saved for months to afford the tickets we do have so my son could meet his grandparents. And it wasn't enough to sit up there with the rich folks." She practically spat out the last 2 words. At this point, the flight attendant, who had been loitering nearby, stepped a little closer. "Is everything all right here?" she asked quietly, looking primarily at the woman. The mother glared but nodded curtly. "Fine," she said, finally stepping aside a bit. I took that opportunity to move past her, eager to escape the confrontation. As I did, she added in a venomous whisper, "Enjoy your selfish life." I slid back into my seat, feeling a mix of emotions swirling: anger, guilt, indignation. I felt tears prickling at the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I was not going to cry on an airplane, certainly not over this. The rest of the flight passed in tense, awkward silence. The mom never approached me again, and I avoided looking in her direction when disembarking. Once we landed and deplaned, I hoped that was the end of it. I was walking toward baggage claim, rolling my carry-on behind me, when I heard a familiar voice behind me, the mom, talking to someone on the phone. I couldn't catch everything, but I clearly heard some jerk in first class wouldn't even give me his seat when he saw me struggling with the baby. Yes, exactly, people are so heartless. She was walking just a few paces behind me, apparently unaware that I was right there within earshot. I quickened my pace, simultaneously feeling anger and embarrassment boiling inside me. Was she seriously blasting me to whoever was on the phone, while I was right here? I ended up ducking into a restroom just to let her pass by so I wouldn't have to face her again at baggage claim. My nerves were shot, and I couldn't handle more conflict. Now I'm sitting here at the airport cafe, recounting all this while it's still fresh, trying to process. A couple of other passengers on the flight, who witnessed parts of the drama, approached me after we landed and quietly told me I did the right thing standing my ground. One even said, "She was way out of line. You paid for that seat." It helped to hear that, but I'm still feeling deeply unsettled. I understand she had a tough situation. I really do. Part of me feels like maybe I could have just given her the seat to keep the peace and help a struggling mom. But another part of me is angry that I was put in that position at all. It shouldn't be on me to sacrifice what I paid for because she was unprepared or unlucky. I keep replaying her words in my head. Selfish, heartless, privileged. Are those fair because I wouldn't give up my first-class seat? I didn't cause her baby to cry or vomit. I didn't make her buy an economy seat. I was just minding my own business, and suddenly I'm the villain in her story because I set a boundary. I have a flight back home next week, and the same first-class seat on the return leg, incidentally, and I'm already anxious, paranoid that some other scenario will play out where I'm asked to give it up. I feel shaken and frankly guilty, but also indignant. I need some outside perspective here. Was I truly so wrong? Should I have just sucked it up and moved to make her life easier? Or was it unreasonable of her to even ask me in the first place and then call me names when I said no? I don't feel like a monster, but the way she looked at me, I swear, I've never had someone look at me with such contempt in my life. It was haunting. Anyway, that's my story. I've been told by a friend that I should post this here to get some unbiased opinions. So, what do you think? Am I the asshole? Update 1. Update 1. First, thank you for the overwhelming response to my original post. I didn't expect it to blow up. The consensus was MTA, not the asshole, which is a huge relief because I've been second-guessing myself nonstop. Your comments and similar stories really helped me feel less crazy about standing my ground. I wish I could say the drama ended there, but it exploded in real life too. Less than 24 hours after I posted, a friend texted me, "Dude, is this you?" with a screenshot from Facebook. My stomach dropped. It was a long rant in a parenting group from a woman describing the exact incident I wrote about, obviously the mom from the flight. In her post, she painted me as this monster who made my baby suffer because I refused to switch seats. She said I was heartless, entitled, that I even smirked at her, which never happened. She wrote that my refusal caused her baby to cry so much he vomited on her, and that I had no compassion or basic decency. The comments on her post were brutal, all siding with her and skewering me. People called me a jerk, a horrible person, speculated that I must hate children. It was awful to read. As if that wasn't enough, her rant spread beyond Facebook. Someone posted screenshots of it on Twitter, and it went viral there too. By that evening, I even saw an online article on a popular news site. Mom calls out first-class passenger who refused to help her, and crying baby. The article only had her side of the story, of course. It basically shamed me, the unnamed passenger, for not giving up my seat, quoting her extensively about how desperate she was and how cold I supposedly was. Reading that made my blood boil. At this point, I was just a nameless villain to the internet, but I started worrying someone might realize that first-class guy was me. I didn't use my real name on Reddit, and she never knew my name, but the article did mention the airline en route, LA to New York. Sure enough, the next day at work, a colleague asked me in private, "Hey, was that viral story about a plane seat you? It sounded eerily similar." I admitted it was me. He was supportive and said I did nothing wrong, but it was unnerving that even people I know were seeing this. Even my boss gently joked, "So you're famous now, huh?" after his wife showed him the article. I was mortified. By that night, I was feeling pretty stressed and frankly angry. A lot of Reddit had my back, but on Facebook and Twitter I was being torn apart by people who had no clue about my side. I considered making a public post to defend myself or replying directly to her, but ultimately I decided that jumping into an internet flame war would just pour gasoline on it. My friends agreed. Better to stay low and let it blow over. Interestingly, on day 2 of the saga, someone claiming to have been on our flight popped up in the comments of that news article and the viral tweet. They wrote, "I was actually there, and the first-class guy was polite and had a reason, back injury, for saying no. The mom was the one causing a scene. I have no idea who that was. Maybe the businessman who sat near me or another passenger, but seeing that comment felt vindicating. It didn't erase all the hate, but at least the story wasn't completely one-sided out there. As of now, the furor is finally dying down. The internet outrage machine seems to be moving on to the next drama du jour. I'm still a little on edge, half expecting the mom to try for a bigger audience. Her post mentioned someone suggesting she contact a news station, eek. But hopefully she moves on too. After seeing how she twisted the story, I've lost most of the sympathy I had left for her. I get that she was stressed, but lying and exaggerating to sick an online mob on me is just not cool. It feels like she wanted revenge on me, and she got it. Anyway, I'm going to keep laying low and not engage. I mainly wanted to update here, because so many of you were supportive, and I thought you should know how wild things got. I'll post another update if anything major happens, though I'm really hoping this is the end of it. Update 2. Update 2. I genuinely hoped the last update would be the end of this saga. The internet moved on, and I wanted to put it behind me, but fate had other plans. The final act of this story just played out, and it was surreal. A week after the incident, I went to the airport for my return flight from New York to LA. I got to the gate early, anxious to avoid any drama and just get home. I was sitting in the gate area sipping a coffee when I felt someone staring daggers into me. I look up and, you guessed it, she was there. The mom with the baby, standing not 10 feet away, at the same gate, glowering at me like I was the devil incarnate. My heart jumped into my throat. What were the odds? At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, but no, it was definitely her baby in a stroller this time, and her eyes locked on me in pure hatred. It looked like we were booked on the same flight again. I quickly averted my gaze, hoping maybe she'd just ignore me. No such luck. She marched right over, pushing the stroller in front of her. The baby was awake but calm, for now. She stopped a couple feet from where I sat, and said in a low, seething voice, "So, we meet again." I didn't even know how to respond. People in the gate area were already looking at us. I'm sure my face went pale as a ghost. I managed to say, "Look, I don't want any trouble." She laughed. A harsh, quiet laugh. "You've caused nothing but trouble," she snapped. "Because of you, my entire trip was ruined. I hope you're happy." I glanced around, panicking. I absolutely did not want a scene. Not again. Not in an airport. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I whispered. We're on the same flight. Let's try to be civil, okay?" Her eyes flashed. "Civil? You humiliated me and my baby, and then you ran to the internet to mock me." That caught me off guard. Did she know about my Reddit post? She must have found it. I'm not exactly hiding my side of the story now. Before I could reply, she continued, her voice rising a little. "You told everyone a pack of lies about me." "I didn't lie," I interjected, keeping my tone as calm as possible while my heart pounded. I just explained my side because you were telling the whole world I'm a monster. At this point, a gate agent noticed the tension and came over, asking quietly, "Is everything okay here?" I hadn't even realized it, but we had drawn an audience of other passengers, pretending not to listen. The mom immediately launched into it. "No, everything is not okay. This is the guy from that flight I told you about," she snarled at the poor gate agent as if they knew what she was talking about. "He's the one who wouldn't let me sit in first class with my baby. He ruined our flight, and then he slandered me online." The gate agent looked bewildered. "Ma'am, I'm sorry you had a bad experience, but I need you to lower your voice or I'll have to call security." Her face was practically vibrating with rage now. She pointed a finger at me, handshaking. "He is the worst person I have ever met," she hissed, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear clearly. "My baby could have died from all that stress he caused, do you understand? Died!" I was absolutely stunned at this hyperbole. The gate agent stepped between us as I stammered, "That's not true." "Enough!" the agent said firmly, directing her attention to the mom. "I'm going to ask you to please return to your seating area and remain calm. You can file a complaint with the airline if you wish, but you cannot confront other passengers here." The mom opened her mouth as if to argue more, but then the agent raised a hand and added, "If this continues, I will have to involve airport security. Let's keep things calm." She finally backed off, but not before shooting me a final murderous glare. "This isn't over," she muttered at me. She returned to her spot across the gate area. I sat there in a cold sweat, hands trembling around my cup. A kindly older woman next to me leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry, dear. Some people just need to blame others for everything." I gave her a grateful half-smile, but I was shaken to my core. Boarding started shortly after. I hung back, hoping to avoid passing near the mom. Since I was in first class again, I had booked the same seat 1A for the return. I was supposed to board first, but I waited until the very end of the first-class boarding group, practically sneaking down the jetway. I didn't see the mom as I settled into my seat, but I knew she was on board somewhere behind that curtain. I told one of the flight attendants right away that I had a concern about a passenger. I briefly and quietly explained that I had an altercation with this woman last week, and she had just confronted me at the gate. The attendant's eyes widened. I think she recognized the scenario. She nodded and said, "I remember hearing about that issue. Don't worry, we'll keep an eye on it. If anything happens, hit the call button immediately." So now I was sitting in my seat, heart still hammering, just praying that this flight wouldn't be a repeat of last time. For the first half hour after takeoff, everything was surprisingly calm. I started to think maybe she'd just leave me alone. The baby even seemed quiet. I dared to hope. That hope was short-lived. About an hour into the flight, as the flight attendants were starting drink service, I heard a commotion from behind the curtain. It sounded like raised voices. I removed my headphones just in time to catch a familiar voice shouting, "Don't tell me to calm down! I am calm!" I sunk down in my seat. Oh no, not again. Suddenly, the curtain burst open, and the mom was right there in the aisle of first class, clutching her baby, who was now wailing loudly. A flight attendant was trailing behind her saying, "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat." But the mom barreled ahead. Her hair was disheveled, face flushed with fury. She zeroed in on me immediately. "You!" she screamed over the baby's cries. "Are you happy now? Huh? Getting your wish to torture us again?" I was literally speechless. The entire first-class cabin froze, drinks mid-pour, everyone staring in shock. The flight attendant grabbed her arm, but she shook it off. "This man is tormenting me and my child," she yelled to the cabin at large. "He's a sadist. He enjoys our pain." It was unhinged and terrifying. I was trapped in my window seat as she stood in the aisle a foot away, shouting. The baby was crying. She was crying, actual tears of rage in her eyes. "Ma'am, that's enough." Another flight attendant had rushed up, and a second later I saw a male crew member, maybe an air marshal or just a strong flight attendant, come and gently but firmly take her by the shoulders from behind. She resisted, still pointing at me. He did this to us," she kept screaming. Within a minute they were physically escorting her back behind the curtain. The baby's wails gradually faded, as they likely carried or guided her all the way to the back galley or something. I just sat there shaking like a leaf while a different flight attendant knelt by my seat and asked if I was okay. I couldn't even form a coherent answer. I was mortified and scared and just sad. So sad that it had come to this. The pilot made an announcement shortly after, in that stern, "There's been an incident" tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the disturbance. We have a situation in the cabin under control. We may be contacting authorities to meet the aircraft upon landing. Thank you for your understanding." Hearing that made it real. She had completely snapped, and now she might actually face legal consequences. The rest of the flight was a blur. They kept the mom and baby in the very back with a crew member watching her. I half expected an emergency landing, but the pilot must have decided she wasn't a further threat since they managed to calm her, or at least contain her, after that outburst. We made it all the way to LA on schedule. When we landed, they made everyone stay seated as law enforcement came on board. I saw 2 officers walk to the back, and a few minutes later they escorted the mom off the plane. She was hunched over, looking defeated, a very stark contrast to the ball of fury from minutes before. The baby was in her arms, still crying. As she passed my seat, the officers guiding her out, she looked at me one last time. Her eyes were red and full of tears, but behind them her hatred was still burning bright. "This isn't over," she rasped at me again as the officers gently pulled her along. That sent a chill down my spine. I just stared at my tray table, not reacting. After she was taken off, the passengers around me started murmuring. A couple of them patted me on the shoulder or offered awkward, sympathetic smiles. One said, "What a nightmare, I'm so sorry." I nodded but didn't really speak. I was too shaken. I was escorted off after most passengers, and an airline representative took a statement from me about what happened. I briefly explained the history, that she and I had an issue on the flight out last week and she's been harassing me since. The rep and the officers who spoke to me after dealing with her were very understanding. They told me she might be banned from flying with the airline pending an investigation, and that I might be contacted if they need a witness statement for any legal proceedings. I just kept saying I can't believe this happened. Eventually, I made it out of the airport feeling like I'd been through a war. I'm home now, physically safe, but my nerves are shot. I don't know what's going to happen to that woman. Part of me feels sorry for her on some level, because clearly she was overwhelmed and snapped. But another part of me is angry and just done with this whole situation. She told me this isn't over, even as she was being dragged away by police. I have no idea what she meant by that. Maybe it was just an empty parting shot in her rage. I doubt there's anything more she can do to me at this point. But the words still haunt me a bit.